So this story is dedicated to my father. My father knew that his time to go was coming soon, that there wasn't any time to waste, and I knew that too. So in the spring of 2015, I decided to go and be with my father in the place where his spirit shined. That was in Buenos Aires, Argentina, because he was from there, and he grew up there, and that was his childhood home. And he had this wonderful love for going back there as an adult, as a retired person, and spending a lot of time in his apartment that he had there. And his apartment had these Baroque-style stairs that spiraled up to his first floor, and this small little kitchen he was determined that Julia Child would be so proud of. And he also had these antiques from Spain that we had that filled every nook and cranny of that apartment. That was his heaven. That was his wonderful place. And he also loved chasing taxis. Now, he had Parkinson's at that time, so when we chased taxis, I mean, we'd kind of, he'd say taxi, and then you'd have a yellow and black cab come up and show up, and he'd hobble over with his Parkinson's, and we'd get in there. And he loved taking the taxi. He loved showing off his city to his daughter or to anyone he could, to the Parisian architecture of the city that sang to the sad notes of the bandoneon, of the tango. And he loved talking to the taxi drivers. He'd just go on and on. I mean, they probably got tired of hearing him at times. But he'd go on and on, and then eventually he'd say, you know what, this is the most amazing city in the world. And they'd look in the rearview mirror with this kind of nod of, yeah, but you didn't probably have to live here like we did, in this third world type, first world country. But my father, being the immigrant, he loved going back there. And for him, roaming in the taxis, for me, was like, for him being the gaucho, the cowboy that he always wanted to be, the Argentinian cowboy that roamed the pampas, the grasslands of Argentina. That was his dream. He was this immigrant who went somewhere else and did something else. It wasn't like he ever became that, but for him, there was a freedom in that taxi ride. And there was a freedom in being in his apartment. And that apartment, I could feel it, like I would cry just feeling it, was his heaven for him. And he wanted to so much be able to take his last breaths there when that time came. But it wasn't the case. It wasn't what was to be. He had Parkinson's, and then he admitted to me that second spring that I was with him in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, he said, I've got to go back to the States because I've got to get my white blood count done because I've got leukemia and it might go up. So after that summer, he went back, and of course, the test showed that his leukemia had acted up, and he needed to do radiation. And that was the beginning of the end. He did the radiation, leukemia didn't get him, but then they discovered he had melanoma. And so soon my sisters and I and the whole family from Argentina, from Germany, all over came to be with my father in the US, with my mother there in the living room, as someone had shared before, with hospice there, and all the things you suck and, give them to help them out. And he had his legs filled with blisters. And he was in immense amount of pain. But my father was that type that it was like, if you tell him that he's in pain, he'd go, no, I'm not. I'm going to walk all the way to that corner, and I'll show you I'm not in pain. He was tough as nails, and nothing faced him except death. So there he was. And it was 3 days before he died. His birthday was February 20th. 3 days, and all the family had come, and his favorite cousin, my cousin, his favorite nephew, came and visited him on his birthday. And it was this wonderful moment. And we all sat at the table, and kind of the bed was over here, and the table was over there, and we started toasting to him with wine. He loved wine, whiskey, anything, And we started toasting to him, and he started grunting, because he couldn't talk. And so we wheeled him over to the table, because clearly he wanted to celebrate his own birthday. And then he grunted again, because he needed his whiskey, which he couldn't drink anyway, but we gave it to him. And he was like that. He was just a fighter. And that last day, he also insisted on doing what he always did, is he was determined that will could even beat death. So he then growled again and let us know he wanted us to lift him up and that he was going to walk. He was going to do it. So we tried, but his weight was so great that he crumbled under his weight. And at that point was the first point I'd ever seen my father surrender. And he knew that was it. There was no turning back. And he went into a deep coma, into a deep sleep for several days. And a cousin of mine that was visiting, another cousin, and other family, we were there to the very end. And then it was on the 23rd of February. The address is 23 Covington Court. He died at 2:03, actually. And it was very odd, but what happened was my cousin suddenly said, he opened his eyes, and we quickly raced over to him. We held his hand, and we were there. Just him breathing in, out. And I could just feel him, that feeling of like, can he do it? Can he finally let go? Can he finally surrender and do this journey that he's been scared of his whole life? And then he stopped breathing. But then his breath came back. But then it was his final breath. It went through this narrow passage of his body, his spirit leaving from his chest all the way through his shoulder, his neck, and out his head. And he gave this final breath of leaving the body. And at that point, I was there and I felt like I'm again with him, roaming the streets of Buenos Aires in a taxi. I am adventuring with him on this next adventure, and I'm actually smiling, not because he's going, but because I can see him. He's finally that gaucho, that cowboy that's riding the plains, las pampas de Argentina, and he's riding forth, not a care in the world, free as can be. All those times that he pushed so hard, having to be someone, to be this immigrant in a foreign land, and now I could feel that he was leaving it all behind. And he was riding forward, no reins holding him back, fearless, free. This experience was much more than his apartment in Argentina. And I just whispered, ever so slightly, you did it. You finally did it. You're free.